Hello and good morning. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm kind of replacing Marta Kusmov's Office for Contemporary Art, so I'll do my best to fill her shoes. I am going to go straight to the alternative issue of the alternative and not describe the art scene as Dori did, but it's very similar in a way. So apply what she said to the Norwegian art scene and you got the picture, more or less, except for the money, and I'll come back to that. So I'm going to start with a little looking back, like a background. And let me see, look the watch again. Since the beginning of 2000, there was a kind of state of emergency or crisis in the art scene because of two very central institutions in Oslo being kind of dysfunctional. And one of them was the National Museum, which was founded merging 5 museums into one big super museum. And this process was very painful for all the parties involved and resulted in an intense debate and dominated the discussion, and that lasted for many years. And it's not until recently that the debate has calmed down somewhat. Is this button? This one, yeah. And still, the new museum has not been built, so the story is to be continued. And so that's the new monster, the new National Museum. And then, on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, there was another monstrous reorganization taking place, one that actually started in 1996, actually before that even, but it was kind of decided and final in 96. And that was the merger of all the 5 of the higher educations into one big super school. And thus, KHIO, or the Oslo National Academy of Arts, was created. And it was motivated by the idea that cultural institutions should be run in a corporate and efficient way. And this huge reorganization culminated in the final move this year. But in 2006-2007, the discussions were crazily heated, especially among the professors and students at the Art Academy and with the administration of this school. And the teachers and the students at the academy were totally absorbed in discussions and demonstrations. So a lot of the attention was on these two cases and sucking really energy and focus from other aspects in the art field. At the same time, other central institutions were regarded outdated and sleepy among many of the artists, many of the people in the art world, such as Kunstnernes Hus, which is an old and prominent institution, and UKS, the Young Artists Association. I'll come back to that. So in the void of these power centers, a number of self-organized initiatives started to emerge. And in 2007, there was a strong focus on the alternative art scene in the media. The alternative art scene was brought in to take part in the polemic against the big institutions in the media. And many articles were focusing on the boom in artist-run spaces. They were written, and artists come gallerists were interviewed very often in the media. And some of the things they listed as important factors for the emergence of this strong movement was the feeling that the established galleries and institutions had nothing to offer to the young art scene. It is worth mentioning that there was a very strong group of students coming out of the academy in this time who had a lot of energy, experience in talking to the media because of the KIO, the school situation, and knew how to get attention. But at the same time, they saw very few possibilities in entering the established art world. So the artists wanted to show what they found interesting. They were well aware of the mechanisms working in the art world, and many found starting a place a very good way of launching their own artistic careers. And the artist-run project spaces are often short-lived due to the strain the full-time idealistic, non-profit, and often privately funded activity puts on the individual artist. So the artists behind these artist-run spaces that I'll come back to, like Bastard and Rekord, often took the opportunity to urge for government support in the media, while others fueled the image of the messy and eccentric and artist-run project as an undefinable and truly subversive element in an otherwise conform and grey art world. So, this is a good example. This is Gala Legalism, named after the artist Ivan Galusin. And he's sitting to the left there, trying to be Kurt Cobain. And this space was established in 2005 and was running until 2008. The name also, the gallery changed names many times. And it was run primarily by these two guys, Ivan Galusin and Christian Schilstad, in Midtown Oslo. And the program was a combination of international and local, and with a distinct, like, big emphasis on party factor. And the idea behind the space was to offer possibilities for work and living for their friends, and at the same time be an exhibition space for artists who didn't fit into the commercial gallery scene. So, I mean, this is something I will say about very many of the spaces I will be talking about. Another one is Bastard, which opened also in 2005, and it was running until 2009, and he kind of became the father figures of the alternative spaces in Norway, and it was really the face of the artist-run spaces. It was actually established together with Marius Eng, but from 2006 he was running it by himself. And it operated as a place for social events and for exhibitions, and the exhibitions often had a rough expression with a low-budget production. And it was considered one of the most important artist-run spaces in Oslo during this period. And but at the same time, it functioned as his studio, as his home. So it had a very kind of mixed function, this place. But nevertheless, the public kind of always understood this as a very kind of clear space, and had a very huge public, lots of attention, and yeah. And the goal of Bastard was often to be unpredictable and take risks. And it was also run by private funding, so of course they didn't have to answer. He didn't have to answer to anyone. And but once he learned how to write applications, which took a few years, he started getting funding, of course, and from the Arts Council, and I'll talk about the Arts Council a little bit later. So at the same time, in 2007, another place came, and it was Rekord, and it was run by the artist Ingvild Langgaard, Eirin Stern, and Tora Dolven Balke. And they were driven by a need to challenge the defined power within the established commercial galleries and institutions that they felt dominated the art scene in Oslo at that time. But they have now given up the space and are working as a curatorial platform without any fixed abode. Yeah, I'll actually just be very quick because I have many. Raket was started actually in 2003, so earlier. And it's not a space. It's a collaboration between the artist and curator Åse Løvgren and Caroline Tampere. And they're focusing on creating temporary platforms for collaborative interdisciplinary production. They have been, since the beginning, using a variety of strategies, juggling between taking on roles such as curators, commissioners, artists, editors, and publishers. And currently they are working with the project called Common Lands, Allmannaretten, which is a project that takes the city development process in the area of Bjørvika in downtown Oslo in the Bay, as a point of departure to investigate questions around waterfront development, democracy, accessibility, and distribution of power. Yeah, so, and these are, I mean, unlike the previous ones, they are, you know, working and keeping the same format as they have been. This is the institution I was director for some years. They opened in 2007 in Oslo, but they started actually in 2004 in Berlin, and being an exhibition space for Norwegian artists and architecture, but becoming increasingly more international, also getting increasingly more support from the Arts Council. And, but also being one of the places that is working with sponsors and other kind of funding. I'm actually not going to talk so much about that, but politically there's a wish in Norway from the cultural Ministry of Culture on one side to reduce the funding of the arts and encourage the art institutions to find private sponsorship, and 0047 has been kind of an example that they use as a how it's possible to do it, so not be totally dependent on this funding from the Arts Council or the Ministry of Culture. Yeah, I continue. So this is Landings. It's a space outside of Oslo. It's located close to something called Vestfossen Kunstlaboratorium, which is run by artist Morten Viskum. And he invited Lars Andreas Tove Christiansen and Fredrik Verslev to make a project space out there. It's quite far, but they have a program in the summer, an ambitious one, and but they also have a totally zero budget production. The artists apply for funding if they can, if there's time, and they have the rent for free through the laboratory, Kunstlaboratorium, yeah. But they are also, maybe, I don't know, it's just a feeling I got from talking with them that maybe they're getting a little bit tired of the zero budget situation. So, and also there was, I'm going to come back to that, but they did not get this kind of funding for artist-run spaces that was published now, or like announced now. So they kind of, I think they are kind of a little bit unsure whether or how to continue, which is a pity because they have a really good program. They have also something called Landings Journal, which is published 3 times a year, and the editor of that is curator Geir Haraldset. And they also have something called Landings Editions, where they invite the artists that participate in Landings to make a signed and numbered work exclusive for the project space. I don't have a picture for that, but there's also a space in Oslo called Podium, which was established in 2006 and run by a big group actually of artists in a very flat structure, but the face forward in Podium is Snorre Vammen, and he's also involved in other things. So actually he's gonna pop up on one of the pictures, but the Podium is started out as kind of a stage arts, like theater-oriented project space, and has become more kind of a contemporary art space lately, but it's very interdisciplinary, also very kind of zero budget, but receives occasional support from the Arts Council. This is the group behind Torpedo, and Torpedo Bookstore was founded in 2005 by Karen Kristine Tandberg, Elin Maria Olavsen, Anna Karin Hedberg, Pia Sødegård, and Eivind Slettmås. And they were the gang also behind the bookshop at the former bookstore at the Museum of Contemporary Art. That was closed down in 2004. It was a wonderful bookstore, and everybody missed it immediately. The reason why they shut down this bookstore was because of the merger that I talked about in the beginning, and they wanted to have like a big commercial bookstore to take over, and they did. And the result was, of course, not as fun as the original bookstore, but luckily this fantastic gang continued. And they are also a publishing house. They they say, we wish to contribute to collaborations between artists, self-organized networks, and institutions. We want to help realizing experimentation within the book format and publishing projects that are too narrow for the traditional publishing houses. And they are now also promoting and producing artist books, art theory, and critical readers. And they were kind of in a place called Hausmania, which is a kind of a, what you call that, squatted house in Oslo, and which was shut down, and they got a spot in the new Kunsthall Oslo instead. So now they function more as a kind of museum bookstore again, and which is fine, which is nice, and it's a really, really good place. We're happy to have them in Oslo. I'll come back to Kunsthall Oslo also a little bit later. So this is a young gentleman, Leander Djønne, who is involved in many things. This is Dortmund Bodega, which is a space that was initiated in 2009, and it's next to kind of a like graffiti writer shop with full of cans and pens and stuff like that. And the owner of this shop is also involved in this. Sjur Kolstad is his name. Leander is definitely kind of in charge of the program. And also the space, what is special with the space, it has a very high frequency of projects, with 1 or 2 openings a week sometimes. And so far they've realized approximately 6 projects since 2009 and have planned over 40 projects for the next year, actually just until July. So they have like a wildly active program. And the space has been financed with private money up until now, but now in September it was public that official that they will receive support for 3 years, but with 1.2 million Norwegian kroner. So that kind of changes everything. But they're seen as unpretentious but already mythical as a space. All the ingredients needed for an artist-run space. Leander has a lot of energy, and he has this group that he started with Anders Dahl Monsen. It's called the Parallel Action. Also making a lot of noise and contributing largely to what's happening in the contemporary art field. It started in 2006 as an educational course project for Prosjektskolen, and Prosjektskolen is a new foundation school, private, in Oslo, which is also kind of important. I don't have a slide, but Prosjektskolen, it's also an important part of this new image, the image of what's going on in Oslo, at least. So, at Prosjektskolen, after a number of experimental courses and workshops, the first official manifestation of Parallelaksjonen took place in the so-called White Biennial in Los Angeles. And ever since they've been doing a number of projects, one of them at Bastard, well, actually the last project at Bastard, I think. That was December 2009, and they realized like a 37.5 hours long seminar at Bastard. And the seminar involved more than 50 people, and there was an ongoing program really all the time. Lectures, screening, talks, and in addition to common meals. They were eating and sleeping together in that little space. And in this seminar, the normal Norwegian working week of 37.5 weeks was compressed into one continuous and exhausting exercise. It was very nice and intimate and intense. Their next Parallelaksjonen still, the next project they did was called The Great Escape, and it was this summer in 2010. Equally ambitious, a lot of people involved. It took place in the woods out of Oslo. And again, like 50 people were involved for a week building like platforms in the trees where they had seminars for 2 full days and nights. and they were eating together and sleeping in tents, as you can see up there. And common for these two projects by the parallel action is the idea that the body and the physical surroundings have to be activated in order to instigate a political process. And today, the parallel action also involves Anders Smeby of Bastard and Snorre Vammen, who is also Podium. And yeah, so it's also growing. Here we have two other gentlemen who is doing stuff a little bit more conventionally. This is 1857, and it was established in 2010, so some months ago, by artists Steffen Håndlykken and Stian Eide Kluge. Actually, they also have some experience based on this merger that I talked about early on. They started something called Institutt for Farge, which was a department of one of the schools being merged that was kind of cancelled in the process of the merger, and they kind of created their own education during their last part of their education. So I think also this is kind of interesting to see that these, and Steffen actually, he's now kind of very heavily involved in the theory department of this school. So he's also a person who is kind of, having an impact on the new generation of artists coming out of this big super school, because he's going to probably, I guess, be like head of theory and have a lot of impact on that. But back to 1857, they just started this artist-run gallery occupying a former lumber yard in downtown Oslo. Yes. So, this is the showing a picture from their architectural show, their last show, architectural rural, yeah. And so you see this huge space. It's really huge. So they can. It's cold, especially in the winter, but they can realize kind of crazily big things. And the other space looks more like a proper artist-run space with this weird floor. But it's also a combination of studios and offices and everything together. Anyways, 1857 is an ambitious project, and they aim to establish connections between the Norwegian art scene and young artists abroad, bringing international artists to Oslo. They say themselves, it's a place to convene and converge, receive, answer, and honor contemporary art in Oslo. They were one of the recipients of the new kind of support for artist-run spaces that Dortmund Bodega also got. Also 1.2 million Norwegian kroner over 3 years. I'll talk more about this support a little bit later. This is not 3. Oh, you're kidding me. Okay, this is not alternative, it's just new. This is alternative. This is Freddy Knox. It's an artist-run space in Oslo. These are two energetic young people, Anna Daniel and Sverre Strandberg. They have a plank in their kitchen where they make exhibitions. So the plank you can see up in the left corner there. And you're kind of invited, especially if you to go there. It's very small. But these two guys have a lot of energy, and they made this kind of crazy project this summer. Giant bowl on Monuments Day. It was a one-day sculpture show of giant inflatable sculptures commissioned especially by these guys. 24 artists participated, and it was on Bislett Stadium, like the big sports stadium in the middle of Oslo. It was a collaboration with UKS, also the Young Artists Society, and Koru, which is a kind of public arts institution. So I'm going to go to out of Oslo and up to Tromsø. This is small project space. Actually, small project, but yeah, small project space. It's run by a guy called Jet Pasqua, and it started in Manila in Philippines in 2001. But he moved to Tromsø And in 2008, it resurfaced. And it's with the assistance of French artist Laurent Fauconnier, I don't know how to pronounce his name. It organizes events and exhibitions and focusing on interdisciplinarity, also thinking about, focusing on artists living in Tromsø. And they also aim to exchange exhibition with other artist-run spaces in Norway, Europe, and Asia. And they also received this 3-year support from the Arts Council. And this is another space in Tromsø, which is a little kiosk. So it's a very, very small initiative by Espen Justad, started in 2009. It's 15 square meters, so super small. This is Kurant. They received this 3-year support. I'm just going to go really quickly. You can see the names at least. This is Volt, it's Bergen. We're now in Bergen, the city of Bergen. It's started in 2008 by curator Marianne Zamecznik. It's funded by the city of Bergen. It's including international artists and yeah. This is Entré, another artist-run gallery in Oslo, in Bergen, and it's established in 2009 by Cato Løland and Randi Grov Berger. And the program is based on solo shows with unknown artists. They don't say that. I mean, other people have said. And according to other people, it's the new shit, the good stuff. They also received the 3-year support. So 5 spaces received this support. So this is Ytr, online magazine from Bergen again. They publish features, documentations, and more often related but not limited to the regional art scene in Bergen. Established by these 4 girls in 2008. They're artists. And then I would want to include another blog, which I think is important, which is this guy, André Gali, who started a blog taking pictures of openings and kind of making some reviews and stuff. But what is happening, because he started in 2006, and what you can see is that going through his archive, you actually have a kind of documentation or archive of all the alternative stuff that's been going on. And that's the problem with the kind of alternative scene, that is changing an ephemeral world, which often suffers from a very short and fragmented memory. And I think people like André is kind of helping us to see what happened, really what happened, and actually have the pictures to prove it too. And then I wanted to show you this guy, which is Swedish, and he's newly arrived in Norway and already made a big impact. And I mean, before I did this presentation, I sent out many emails to people in the art world, and many mentioned him and UKS as a kind of important motor now. So I just want to say something very quickly. He's one of the people who's kind of also critical towards this kind of massive funding in Norway, saying that it's a fantastic situation, but it comes with consequences. You have to make sure that the artists don't get lulled into laziness by guaranteed commissions. We can't make it too cozy. This is 2 new galleries, Christian Torp and Maria Veia, and these are actually kind of artist-run stuff abroad that I wanted to include too. This is El Parche in Bogota in Colombia, Olga Rabayo and Marius Wang. They have an artist residency. And there's Sex Tags. They operate from Berlin, but they also operate from Moss in Norway. And it's kind of also a project that really wants to be in the fringe and not operate inside the art world. Like most of the stuff that I've been talking about now is actually operating in the art world. Sex Tags wants to operate really just outside the art world. And here you have a new space in Berlin, Spiegelsaal by artist Kjellesvik and Hanke Økstad. And here you have curator Hanne Mugås' place in New York, Art Since the Summer of '69, which is also an incredibly small space. Yeah. And Sverre Gullesen, he's the guy who he's guilty for some of the funding that now appeared. I'm going to talk super quickly about it. This man was in the board of the UKS, and he started lobbying at the Cultural Ministry for support for artist-run spaces. They liked the idea, and they decided to open for applications from artist-run spaces, funding actually stuff that was never able to apply for before, like rent, salary, stuff like that. And on 29th of September, just recently, we saw the first round of support. 5 spaces received altogether 5.3 million Norwegian kroner, 660 euros, over a period of 3 years, with a possible extension to 10 years. And, I mean, this support actually got some international. It's kind of like so special that the Art Forum diary wrote about it, that it sounds like it's a kind of funding that sometimes seems justifiable only after the first few rounds of aquavit. And I agree, it's kind of a very huge thing. I'm very curious to see the results of it. And I think that in addition to that, okay, I didn't get that. Anyways, yeah, we have to stop with Sverre Gullesen there. But I wanted actually to say something about the Arts Council, Norwegian Arts Council too, because they have advisors that are very up to date with what's happening on the national, international level, and they are instrumental in supporting a lot of the independent, alternative, and experimental initiatives that we see today. So you might say that the Arts Council is largely responsible for the strong alternative art scene you see in Norway. So actually, that means I'm just going to stop on a critical note here. As a contrast to the predominantly positive opinions about this new alternative scene, there's also a widespread worry that this scene is too local, too provincial, and remaining in a permanent state of periphery. There is a closed circuit of production and funding, where on one side you have the highly competent staff of the Arts Council and the institutions like that, who know the art scene intimately. And on the other side, you have the highly informed and very energetic young art scene, who are more than eager to supply whatever is needed to get their hands on the funding. In this picture, there's a risk that the alternative is dictated by the funding, that it's content, cozy, and lazy, and therefore does not need to think outside Norway or even the local scene. So I'll stop at that.